Okay, here we go. All right, so for the people on Zoom, can you see my screen?
Yes, we sure
Yes.
Yes, Simon.
Yes.
Yes.
Beautiful. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Class participation is always welcome, so thank you everyone for jumping in, and that's also for the people that are in class too. So welcome. How's everyone doing today? Awesome, awesome, Pamela. Thanks for being here. So we're going to dive deep into today's topic and conversation regarding. There's been so many questions regarding lease, paperwork, how to navigate, and when representing an applicant, when representing the landlord, the owner, the do's and don'ts, and obviously we're going to run through a couple of scenarios. So today is going to be one, what channels, what documentation that we need when we represent either party. So today's topic is about supplements and disclosures, and the importance, because we've seen a large amount of issues happening with the leases. It's just a lot of paperwork. And what's so ironic and funny about it is it's starting to be more like a real estate transaction, but we get paid very little. And there's so many paperworks now, tenants' rights, landlords, the back and forth, the do's and don'ts. So I wanted to kind of navigate one through the California Association ZIP forms, but also what I wanted to address and navigate is the checklist, right? So what I wanted to start off first and foremost is, our resource hub, right? And I'm going to use KW South Bay as a resource hub. But when you go to the more section here and you go down to the resource section here, click on that, and then you go where it says office resource, you click there, that provides you with the office resource site. From here, you can go where it says office compliance. Then just below, it has where it says office checklists and disclosures, right? When you click on here, that takes you to the PDF file of all the relevant documentation that we use as an office. Now, this is for the South Bay office, the coastal office, and also the luxury office in the valley are similar with the coastal. But this is where you go and navigate a specific documentation. For today class, we're going to go into the residential lease checklist. So you double click on it, and that's going to provide you with a residential lease checklist. Now, part of the process is, you do have the ability to use a transaction coordinator, right? You do have the ability to use a TC to navigate it, which I would encourage you to do so. Now, pros and cons when it comes to leases, right? There's not significant income that comes from facilitating an applicant because there's not so much paperwork per se with lenders, with appraisals, with inspection reports or inspections being done, but there's still relevant documentation that you have to in order for you to get paid your compensation, right? So I wanted to dive into the conversation and just get an understanding of what that looks like. So in essence, let me just close a couple of these windows here. Here's the residential lease, and you can see there's at least 30 plus documents.
Simon,
Yes.
I don't think we're seeing what you're showing.
Yes, your screen is frozen, I think so.
Oh, okay. Thank you. See, that's good to know. So let me go ahead and click. All right. Can you see it now?
Yes, yes.
There we go.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate it. So yeah, if for any reason it's not coming up, just please let me know. So this goes back again. How I navigated this was through the hub that we have, our KW hub, right? Then I went into the resource section of it, and this is how I was able to populate the lease listing checklist. Okay. So do you all see the residential lease checklist online?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
All right, so here it is. Now look at all of the documents that you need just to represent a tenant and also a landlord, okay? So you have your agency, you have your lease listing if you represent the landlord, you have your Privacy Act advisory, you have a rental property owner disclosures, modification of terms if there's one, the lease rental commission agreement, the broker compensation agreement, the tenant representation of broker compensation, a printed copy of the MLS, and applications and so on and so forth, right? So this gives you a base, right, of what you're getting yourself into when representing a tenant and also representing a landlord. Now, with that being said, and this is just my opinion and my opinion only, right? Which the beautiful thing of having a real estate license, it grants you the ability to not just represent buyers, sellers, investors, and developers, handle, commercial aspects with a commercial agent if you do have a potential commercial deal, right? Just align yourself with someone that is experienced in that type, if it's retail, if it's industrial, if it's a large land, business opportunity, we have agents that handle those type of situations. With that, anyone see the screen? Okay, so I think that was from earlier. With that, when it comes to leases, right, that's a whole different dynamics, and with the flux of litigation that has transpired, I would say in the last 3 years, the California Association of Realtors has really honed in on proper documentation, the do's and don'ts, and how to safeguard your client. One, the most important is discrimination, right? And we hear it quite often. How do we navigate when you get multiple applicants, right, that want to submit for the sake of, a home, a condo, or a townhome, or not even an apartment? How do we navigate that to be able to be within the compliance aspect of it, right? Well, that's where these documentations come into play. So with that, here's just the bare minimum stuff, right? It all depends on the scenario. It all depends on who you facilitate, right? Most of the time, if you are the agent representing the landlord, you're going to put it on the MLS, right? You're going to put the description, photos, the amount of the rent, if it's month to month or if it's a lease. Those are the parameters that you're going to promote on the MLS, right? Then the next step is if you're a member of the association, you have access to what's called RentSpree, right? So RentSpree is a third-party platform that allows you as a agent to allow a consumer, right, an application. And what it does, it gives you the heavy lifting, right, to screen a potential applicant to see if they are qualified, right? Because it's based on many factors when it comes to renting to a tenant, right? And the ultimate decision is the landlord when they finalize and everything aligns to their approval. And then that's when you draft the lease agreement on terms and conditions that the tenant will be obligated and bound by those terms, right? If it's on a month to month or if they're going to do 1 year lease, right? Does that all make sense? Okay. So part of it is these disclosures that are attached to it as well for the purpose of compliance, but more so without all of this, it has to go to the compliance. Compliance will either say you're missing ABC or everything is checked, you're approved, and then that's when we can release the amount. Remember, we do not practice property management, okay? You're not, as part of your ICA, your independent agreement with the company is you don't do property management for compensation, right? Now, if you work for a company that has their own entity, their own license and errors and emissions insurance, on the capacity of that, then it's perfectly fine. But as an agent yourself, you cannot conduct property management, right? Because one, we don't have insurance that covers you if they come after us for a potential litigation, right? So I want to be very clear on that. Now, if it's your own personal property, that's perfectly fine. If you have multiple properties, you can definitely manage those properties because these are your own properties. And I'm assuming that you carry your own liability insurance to protect you from anyone trying to sue, right? That we have no problem. Now, if you're also a broker, okay, if you're a broker in the capacity as a broker associate, and you have your own separate entity and your separate E&O insurance as a broker associate, then yes, you can also do property management. Again, it cannot be tied as a Keller Williams agent. Okay, so I wanted to be clear on that. We're only talking about you facilitating a tenant going through the motion. Someone calls you and says, hey, Simon, I'm looking to rent a home. My budget is, $8,000, but I need at least 4 bedrooms, 3 bath, whatever the case may be. The beautiful thing is you have the ability to do so by going into the multiple listing service and then just start looking at areas that may fit the criteria of your client, right? And then put the puzzle together, right? So in essence, that's where you start doing the initial process in paperwork, right? All right, so now let's go into the parameter of the contract itself, right? So now the essence is once you get to this level, now you're in your actual call forms, right? So when you go to all forms here, there's a section here where you can now navigate and say, well, what type of client are you working with, right? So if you go where it says lease, you click on that. Now it provides you all of the forms that are related to a transaction involved lease. Just by hovering that, it gives you all of the forms. So you don't have to do all the guesswork because most agents, unfortunately, when they go, they have it already default to all right here. So when it's at all, you're going to see all of the documents from A to Z that is all purchases, listing agreements. So to avoid the headache of trying to identify, just go to the very top, right? And make sure when you're using the online library that first, that the California Association of Realtors is the right platform, because here you have all of these other additional documents that are part of it, right? So make sure that it is California Association of Realtors.
Simon,
Yes.
we're still on the home page of the,
Okay, thank you.
Yes, I think it's frozen one more time. We
Got
think so.
Okay, thank you. See, I'm not sure why it's not hovering back. Now, do you see it?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, so let me look at the setting, guys.
No, we're seeing forms library. We're not seeing the form.
Okay. Let's see, 1 second. Let me make sure we navigate this portion of the screen, second cameras. I think every time I toggle, it doesn't allow me to. Okay, let's see if this works. Can you see the screen now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, so as I was saying earlier, once you're on your zip forms, you create a file, right? And that file is very simple to create. All you have to do is when you go to the file, you go to your dashboard. And on here, you now can create a new transaction, right? You click here, and now you have what's called create a new form, right? So then we're creating a new lease. You're going to click there. You can put in the name of your client or the property address that you're going to be submitting an application, or if you're going to be actually leasing out the property, then you can put that information. You can also, if you have the upgraded version, you can also connect and then it'll upload all of the information as well, right? Then it goes into what type of category, right? I'm gonna skip all this because I'm not gonna create one, but then once you create this, then it populates an actual transaction, right? Now you'll know that this particular transaction is regarding your client, right? Then you double click on that, that takes you to this window here. And you want to make sure that it is an active one because you're still in the very beginning of the initial process. Then when you go to all forms here, right, you click on that. People on Zoom, can you still see what I'm doing?
Yes.
Okay. Make sure that it shows California Association of Realtors, because if it has something else, you're not gonna be able, and I know we've had this in the past, right? Where none of the things are populating. Well, it's because you're not on the California Association of Realtors. So make sure that when you're online, this is it. Then here's the little trick, right? When it says all, then it's gonna populate all of the 350 plus documents that are part of this zip forms. To avoid the headache of trying to identify what forms you need, make sure you have a copy of the checklist, but also now you can hover on here and then go where it says lease. You click on that. Now it populates all of the relevant documents that are pertaining to the lease. You don't have to do a lot of the heavy lifting anymore because all of the stuff is here, right? And, you know, it's all of the stuff like your cover sheet, right? So I would encourage you, I do it, is to put a cover sheet so that way a lot of the information, now you can modify it through the cover sheet and then it'll populate to any form. If you have to change the name, you have to change the address, so on and so forth. By having the cover sheet, it'll definitely help you to modify it without actually going to all of the actual forms, right? Then you have your addendums and all of the generic stuff, right? Your application to lease. You can start now adding all of the ones that are on the checklist. So when you create an actual, yeah,
Are you using the mic?
yeah.
You must be talking too loud. People cannot understand you on the Zoom.
Oh, okay. No one has said anything.
They would say,
Oh, got it. Okay. So am I coming out too loud, guys?
No.
Okay. All right. Maybe if I put the mic, can you still hear me?
Yes.
That sounds
hear
better.
you,
It
just-
was, I don't know if it was too close to your face or what, but it was pretty tinny.
Yeah, it would just garble up.
Yeah.
I apologize. Okay, so hopefully now that it's a little bit of a distance, it helps.
Sounds
All right.
good now.
Beautiful. All right, so the application to lease, your bed bug disclosures, your cancellations, which we don't want to use, but you know, you have to if you do have a cancellation. And you go through, you know, all of the documents that you need in order for you to facilitate the actual file, right? Your move out inspections and so on and so forth, right? So once you have all of your file in place, right? Now you start the initial process of whoever you represent. If it's the tenant, then you know that they most of the disclosures is going to come from the listing agent, right? But if you are the listing agent, you want to at least start having all of the paperwork ready and available as well. Now, also, one thing that I wanted to stress is that if you are a member of the California Association of Realtors, you have access to what's called rent spree, right? Now, maybe the owner has their own way of doing a screening, right? But with rent spree is a member service that is part of your membership at no cost to you. You just got to go through the California Association of Realtors platform in order for you to utilize the rent spree. Once you have a username and a password, now you can start creating links that you can put on the MLS. So when someone is interested in submitting an application, part of the initial process is they're gonna have to go through the rent spree platform in order for them to submit an application. Now with rent spree, it allows you to do a background check, right? So they go in there, the tenant will actually pay for the rent spree. And as I said before, one of the elements that you have to understand, if there is more than one adult, they all are planning to live in the home. You want to make sure that they all run a background and a credit check, right? So anyone that's 18 years or older. I've had in the past, what if it's an adult child? Well, if they're 18 and older, I would, make sure that they're also to make sure that you are okay or the owner is okay with it. So anyone that's 18 or older, right, a husband, a wife, brothers and sisters, whoever is going to be occupying the rental, you want to run a background application check, right? Now with Rent Spree, what it allows you to do is one, it checks your credit, it checks background and also evictions, right? So those are the three biggest elements when the owner is making a decision to either rent to the tenant or not rent. And the beautiful thing about Rent Spree, it actually gives you suggestions that yes, it's a good candidate to rent. They meet all of the criteria based on the algorithms of what they provide, because when they submit, their social security, their date of birth, their name, and all of that information. So then when Rent Spree populates, they'll get the link, it'll say that it's coming from you as the listing agent. And then now it starts the initial process for them to see if they're gonna be able to get qualified. Now, I'm gonna play devil's advocate here too as well, right? Because when you go to, and I'm gonna minimize this for now.
Right,
And
Simon, can I ask a question about rent spree?
yes,
Hi there. Okay. That's part of, I know we're going to discuss it later, but that's part of my question, because now if you're putting rent spree on and someone doesn't meet the criteria and they're running an application without you giving it to them because the tenant pays for that. This is my dilemma because, are we putting them on still if we haven't given them our criteria or, listed in the listing itself? If we're letting them go to rent spree, they're not qualified and then they do a app.
yeah, I'm only going to send someone, there, you don't want them to just go to Rent Spree, because I think it's now $45.
Yeah.
People on Zoom, can you see the screen still? Because I changed it.
See the
No.
default there.
No, we see zip forms.
Okay, yeah, that is weird. Okay, 1 second, let me go ahead and
Because that's my question. If we're adding it now to our listing, like I've done for the last 10 years or whatever, it is there for them to go on and pay. But if they haven't met our criteria, this is the new rub here.
yeah, and we'll go through that in a minute. I wanted to just show you through our platform here. Can you see the screen where it says now Rent Spree?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So here on Rent Spree, it allows you to provide, screening process, right? You definitely have to have an account, and because I don't have, it's not on my laptop, I don't remember my password, so I'm not gonna be able to go on there. But on my laptop, I have it already linked, I have my email and my password, so I can actually log into my Rent Spree. But for today's class, unfortunately, I'm not going to be able, because I'm using the actual training room's computer. But that's how you do it. If you have an account, you can log in and it'll give you through the process to put in your email address and your password. Now it takes you to Rent Spree. But what I also wanted to add to this is your MLS, right? So when you go into CRMLS, and you're looking for listings as an example, right? So when you go to CRMLS, you're going to log into your account. Okay. And when you log into your account, people on Zoom, can you see the MLS?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you. I don't know why I have to constantly ask, but I apologize. For some reason, it's not picking up every window. So let's see why this is not hopping on.
I think we read it in the middle, it was not there before. Jackson.
Yeah, so something is happening. All right, so we're having a little bit of a technical issue with that, so. Yeah, unfortunately, I'm not gonna be able to go into, let me see if I can. Go in a different direction with this. Yeah, it's not gonna work, something on this computer. All right, so it is what it is. All right, so once you go back to your platform here, right? On zip forms, and you've already created all of the documentation based on all of the lease information, right? You know, some of the most common forms are the what we call the disclosures, right? So going back to Christine's questions regarding, you know, who are you going to allow that link, right, to start the initial process is one, let's just kind of role play it, right? I'm the listing agent, and then I have a property on the MLS that I'm trying to rent out, right? And let's say that Christine is reaching out to me because she has a client that is very interested in the property, right? Well, part of the initial process that I'm gonna be asking Christine, and Christine, are you okay to role play with me? If you're still on?
Hi, yes, except I'm waiting for a San Diego agent, but yes, I can do that. I'm at my listing in Calabasas.
Okay, no worries. And I appreciate it. So let's say that Christine is representing the tenant, right? She's gonna reach out to me and she's gonna ask, hey, is the property still available? What's the initial process to submit an application? Well, with the zip forms, one way that you can do it is also the application, right? By going into the application and lease rental screening. When you click on this, now it provides you with the actual, and I'm gonna show you.
We're not seeing the change.
Okay,
Sorry.
no problem. Yeah, that's why I love Zoom, but I hate Zoom as well. I'm not sure why it's not toggling every, all right, do you see it now?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, so when you go to the application to lease, this is the application that you or the agent representing the tenant can go through it, right? This is the application to lease and rental screening, right? Car form LRA, right? The application goes into series of stuff, right? The application is completing the application to lease or rent as a tenant with a co-tenant, or a guarantor. So it gives you those options. What I like about this form is very thorough. So it provides you with at least the information that we need in order for us to go through the motions. My opinion, and this is just my opinion only, I would have the agent submit an application before you actually send a rent screen. Have them fill out this application, because here it gives you the name of the applicant, the date of date of birth of the applicant, the driver's license, expiration date, their phone numbers, the proposed occupants that are going to be occupying, if there's any pets, automobiles involved in case of an emergency. Then it goes through a certain list of items, right? J, K, L, and M, that says, does the applicant or any proposed occupant plan to use liquid field furniture such as like water beds and all that? I don't know why they still have that, but apparently people still may have water beds. I haven't seen one since the 80s when I used to have one, and that sucker was cold, especially on the winters, that's why I had heaters. I don't know if you remember the old water beds. But it also, it has that as well. Has the applicant been a party of an unlawful detainer, right? Because if they say no, and when you do a background check and it says there was an eviction 2 years ago, there is a issue with that, right? A failure to disclose matter. And because of that, then you can deny the applicant, right? Because they're not being truthful. So if they're not being truthful, what else are they hiding? In my opinion, right? So this gives you kind of a layer of questions that they must answer. Has the applicant or proposed occupant ever been asked to move out of a residence? And if it is yes, please explain. Okay, maybe there was a
Is that
reason.
fall under the 7 years also?
What do you mean, fall?
Well, if you have the unlawful detainer or bankruptcy in the last 7 years.
So here's my thing, and that's a very valid point, right? What if an eviction happened many years ago, right? Well, here's what I would do, okay? And this is just me. Someone may take it a little different, and it's perfectly fine, because let's just say that this eviction happened 7 years ago, right? It doesn't specify, but it does specify right here, okay, where it says 7 years. So if there's been an unlawful detainer action or a bankruptcy within the last 7 years, so within the last 7 years, you must disclose. If it's been more than 7 years, then you don't have to disclose. But if it does populate, we can at least know that you were within compliance, one, because if it shows that it's been more than 7 years and it still reflects on your credit check, you're still okay. We cannot deny them because based on the statement here, it says in the last 7 years, right? Now, most of the stuff will probably be removed within that time frame, but anything in the last 7 years you must provide if it's been a bankruptcy or if you had a eviction, right? Which is a unlawful detainer action. Has the applicant or proposed applicant ever been asked to move out? We've talked about that. The next one is the occupant ever been convicted or plead no contest to a felony within the last 7 years. So again, full transparency, full disclosure, right? Any potential that may come up, the tenant must provide that as full transparency. Because once we do a background check, all of that information is going to come, especially if there was a felony conviction, okay? Felony convictions are forever, okay? And there's no way of hiding it, only if you're using someone else's entity, right, to try to get. But that's why you have to, as a listing agent, be very diligent. And most landlords and owners, because they've gone through this process many times, they may be also diligent and they're very aware of these so-called scammers, right? So you've got to be very careful. More so, folks, in the leasing elements of it is I feel that there's a lot of liability when it comes to all this. So you want to double check, triple check, quadruple check to make sure that everything is in alignment. And if anything is not in alignment, that's when you need to start asking questions. So that way you have a thorough position to really articulate the conversation to the landlord, because the landlord is ultimately the decision maker if they're going to rent it out to this potential applicant, right? But it gives you, again, a series of questions, right? If they answer yes, they have to explain, right? Then the next goes into the history, right? The history of the residents, and it says after completing a credit review, house provider may consider the nature of a felony and the length of time since it occurred, so long as the felony is directly related to the applicant's ability to meet the obligations under the lease terms and any other relevant mitigation information pursuant to civil CCR 12266. Then the residential history, right? And then here it allows you to at least put 4 different residents if you've moved, okay? Because that also shows either consistency or lack of consistency, right? Stability or not stable. If they are moving frequently, what's the reason, right? And that gives you, and that paints the picture, right? And how you're gonna be having the conversation with the landlord, right? You know, we see that they moved, one residence. And it tells you, from date to date, right? If someone has been moving every year, what's the reason behind that? And it's perfectly fine to ask the agent representing the tenant, or ask the tenant if they're not being represented, and you're facilitating both the landlord and also the tenant. It's perfectly fine to go into the conversation and get a little bit more information. Because as a landlord myself, as an example, I want to make sure that I'm getting the most qualified individual, because I don't want to have any challenges or obstacles that now will second mind me and saying, well, you know what, I should have been a little bit more thorough in my background check with this individual, and now, it has blown up, and now we're seeing some issues, right? So again, kind of navigating the process can be a very delicate process, but remember, the most vital of everything is you cannot discriminate, right? You got to treat everyone equally, right? And that's where we see a lot of the challenge and hurdles, because the tenant feels that they're being discriminated. No, and you got to be very careful, because there's a lot of litigations around discrimination. Tenant, Section 8 tenants as well. We've seen a flux of issues with Section 8. Okay, and I want to be very clear on that Section 8 is not a position where you can decline an applicant. So if someone calls you and says, hey, do you consider Section 8 vouchers? The answer is, we accept all applicants, okay? Because the minute that you say, sorry, the owner does not, that's a violation. And guess what? There's attorneys out there that will put us through the ringer, and ultimately we're writing checks. And we have two incidents right now that one is from one office and the other from the other office, that it was just a simple conversation, but that opened up a can of worms, where now we got a lawsuit because of discrimination. It's a federal violation, so be very careful. If you are the listing agent representing the landlord on listing their rental, you have to accept everyone, right? How you navigate that conversation, and Pamela, I don't know if you have a question?
Oh, I did.
Okay.
I was wondering, do you know if when, like, all of the highlighted parts on there, when we forward that to the potential tenants, is it highlighted and is it in PDF, or do you know?
Oh, good question.
Yeah.
The individual would have to, I believe when you, and let's test that theory in a little bit. So I'll test that theory. I don't remember, because I don't do that many applications.
I was just.
Simon, I can address that. It's like an SPQ and TDS, that it's bubbled out for the applicant. So that's why they have to go separate to each applicant to fill out. Is that the question?
Okay, but the question is, if I was to send this via signature for DocuSign, and the applicant is getting this application, my question is, on either DocuSign or e-signature, does it allow the applicant to fill it out there?
I believe it does it. They changed it. It used to not, but I think it's like the SPQ now that it bubbles it out that they can.
So saying that you could.
I believe so. I know it does to rent spree, but yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, good question. Thank you, Pamela. All right, so you got to be very, very careful, right, when it comes to this. And then here's part two of the application. So this is the residential history. Then it goes into the second part, right? The credit information, name of creditors. Again, why is all of this information relevant, right? Because it paints the picture, it tells the story of the applicant, right? The more thorough that applicant is, the better it's going to show that, one, full transparency, right? If a lot of the stuff is missing, then it questions, are they being truthful, or they don't have any credit? Because again, once you go through the motions of it, right, and go through a third party site, right, like a rent spree, it's gonna pull information, data and all that stuff, right? Because an applicant is like going and purchasing a vehicle, right? What is the first thing that you do when it comes to buying a vehicle? Well, you gotta find and identify the right car you want with all the bells and whistles that you want, and once you found and identify that particular vehicle, right? Then you sit down with the sales and you start trying the negotiating aspect of it, right? But then once you go through the motions, even before that, the sales rep will start going through the elements of asking qualified questions. Well, where are you comfortable with your payments, right? Now, that's a little bit more in the extreme here when it comes to an application aspect is they've already seen the property, they already know the rent amount, right? And they may be comfortable with that. Now it's the qualification aspect of it, right? So this is why it's important to have all this information, because this will tell me exactly where this particular applicant sits, right? Because maybe just one applicant may not qualify. You may need 2 or 3 applicants based on their criteria to be able to qualify on the rent, right? And again, that's gonna be the owner's discretion and decision. Maybe the one applicant is the main household. And they have substantial salary or income that can sustain that rent, right? Because that's the number one thing is, can this individual or individuals maintain the rent, right? And let's say that the rent is 8,500, right? Well, you're gonna be able to kind of paint that picture and see if this applicant would even qualify, because if the applicant makes 5,000 a month and the rent is 8,000 and he or she is the only one, well, that's an avenue not to rent because they're gonna be struggling all the time, right? So you gotta see it from that element too. Just because they have good credit, they have they're super nice, doesn't mean they're gonna be able to qualify, okay? So there's many ways to decline an applicant, right? But you gotta do it vigilantly and also cautiously as well, because that can alter us of a discrimination component. Does that make sense? Okay,
Yes, and
yes, sir.
so it's legitimate that to ask for at least 1 or 2 backup people to back up their lease.
100%, yeah. So the question here is, what if the applicant is a husband and wife, right? And they submit their application, we got a chance to look at it, but they don't hit that threshold, right? And that can happen. So the alternative is, yes, Jim, they can definitely be asked, look, I don't have a problem, I really like everything that I see, but your income doesn't qualify. If you can bring someone else as a tenant, then that could supplement, right? And it may just need that extra income, and they have the actual room space, then by all means, because this also depends on the capacity, right? You cannot put an applicant that has 5 people on a 2-bedroom, 1-bath home, right? It has to make sense, right? This is why you gotta ask these questions and get a very thorough understanding of what the issue is here. Because if they're not being truthful on this, then it compromises our position that we weren't very thorough with doing our research and investigation. And it's perfectly fine to do those thorough investigation, so we can kind of understand how we're gonna present the application paperwork to the landlord, because the landlord is gonna rely on us, right, at the end of the day, on our ability to find and screen an applicant that would qualify, right? At the end of the day, folks, remember, the owner has the direction and discretion to rent it to whoever they want. We could just advise, I'm saying pros and cons, here are 2 applicants that are solid. Here are 3 applicants that unfortunately did not meet the minimum expectation, so those you can put to the side. and not worry because they didn't meet the minimum qualification. But at the end of the day, let's say that there was 5 applicants submitting an application towards a house, the owner can make a decision on who they want to rent it. But if they don't rent it to the ones that are the most qualified, right, that's on them. And if something falls out, that's on them. We just advise those are not the perfect fit for it. Here are the 2 individuals. Out of these 2, then it goes to the next phase, right? The next phase would be running the screening based on the application, right? Because now it goes into the personal references, nearest relative, and then it goes into this section here of the applicant understands and agrees that the applicant to rent only and does not guarantee the applicant will be offered the premises. So it already disclaims that, hey, you can submit the application, but there's still no guarantee that the property will be offered to you. We're still in the beginning stages of the screening process, right? So that's the loophole that someone cannot say, well, you discriminated me from applying for it. No, we didn't. Because it clearly says on this application, there's no guarantee. Okay, that the applicant will be offered the premises, and 2, housing provider may receive more than 1 applicant. That's the key, ladies and gentlemen, right? For the premises, then the applicant will provide a copy of an application of the driver's license or any other acceptable identification upon request. So it's telling you here, folks, we can get the information to make a sound decision when we package this applicant to the landlord, that it's the landlord's discretion and decision at the end of the day if they want to rent it out to this individual or lease it out to these individuals. Does that make sense? You all on the same page? All right, let's continue where it says applicant represents that the above information.
Simon, before you go on.
Yeah.
It says if they have an acceptable driver's license or other, what's the other besides the driver's?
The other can be a passport, can be an ID. And it could be, even an out-of-state license, right? Because that can happen. Maybe someone is moving from Utah, Texas, New York, Florida, Tennessee, right? Ohio, Arizona, Nevada, right? They're coming in to California for work. So they may not have a California driver's license, but they may have a Arizona ID, right? As long as it's their entity, yeah, the owner can make a decision and discretion based on that. So we cannot discriminate someone because they're not from California. Okay, because any of us can be moving from here, moving back east, and we have a California ID or California driver's license. They cannot say, oh, yeah, you're a foreigner. No, you're not a foreigner. You just happen to live in another state, right? So those are, again, some other ways to identify anything that has a photo, a passport, even like those now card passports too. As long as it matches with the application, the owner can make a sound decision to go through the next step. Application represents the above information to be true and complete and hereby authorizes the housing provider to verify the information, obtain a credit report on the applicant, obtain an investigative consumer report on and about the applicant. ICR may include but not limited to a criminal background check report on unlawful detainers, a bad check, fraud warnings, employment and tenant history. It covers everything, folks. This is why you should be using this application because it's very thorough, right? That paints the bio, the resume of this particular applicant. This is why it's important that if it's 2 adults or 3 or 4 adults that are going to be occupying the place, you want to run checks on all 4, all 3, all 2, not just that one, right? Because if we're only relying on that one and the other ones we didn't run a check on, that comes back and haunts us. What's to say that that individual that was the good qualifier never lives in the property and these other 3 people, and that's happened, move in and we never did a thorough background check and now you're having issues where they're not paying, they're damaged, who knows, right? This is why we want to make sure you cover all bases. And as real estate professionals, remember, we're not practicing property management, but what I'm saying is you're the listing agent or you're the applicant, you're the agent representing the tenant. You on that core too as well should be thorough in making sure that you're not wasting your time. Because if someone is not going to qualify, why are you showing properties to someone that's not going to be able to get a place to rent? Then maybe you can send them to, these other large property companies that have, large 150 unit apartment complex that they may have a different system that they use. But for the sake of our position, this is why you want to run a thorough check. By signing below, you acknowledge receipt of the attached notice regarding background investigation pursuant to the California law. And then the RN will be, I believe, will be attached when you start doing all of your disclosures. Then the next section talks about if a screening fee is paid, the applicant will provide a copy of the credit report obtained by the housing provider within 7 days of the housing provider receiving the report. If a screening fee is not paid, check this box if you would like to receive at no charge a copy of the ICR or consumer credit report if one is obtained by the housing provider whenever you or otherwise have a right to receive a copy under the California law. That's only if you receive it. If you don't receive it, then you cannot provide that as part of the initial process, right? The next aspect, it says—
Simon, can I ask a question concerning that?
Yes.
Basically, if the landlord has 3 tenants, doesn't want to be under, I forgot what it was, A, B, something or other. If they do not ask for a fee, but they run the credit checks, now since they're not asking for a fee and they're running it and they're paying, the landlord's paying for the credit checks, does the first qualified screening apply at that point in time? In other words, would that free the landlord from having to pick the first credit check that he ran for qualified tenants applying?
You're saying if the landlord pays for the actual application credit check, right?
Yeah, right.
Well, let's go back where it says if a screening fee is paid, the applicant will provide a copy of the credit report obtained by the housing provider. Okay, so what does that tell you right there?
Well, this is not so much whether they're going to get a credit report or not. It is whether they now can, let's say they run them in order, and the third one that they run in order, though they all qualify from the preliminary qualifications, that he decides on the third, but it was not in the order. The law, as I recall, is that if the first one comes through and you run a credit check and they're good, you have to offer them the house. And this is a way. Had landlords discussed whether there's a way around having to pick the first one if the credit check comes back with something that they don't particularly care for, and so they don't want to pick the first one, they want to pick the second or third?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and I'm not an expert when it comes to these tenants and lease. So it's very difficult for me to say yes or no to it. My suggestion and advice is always, have the landlord, seek and speak with
Got it.
an attorney that specializes in tenant rights and landlord rights to better guide them on what best practice. Again, I don't.
Right. So lawyer up, so to speak.
Very, very much so. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
That, and that's the beautiful thing is we don't have to be experts on all this, but if a question arises from this, is that Mr. and Mrs. Landlord, it's best that you speak with an attorney that can guide you on what best practice and how we can navigate it, because now it's coming from an attorney's point of view who does this for a living, right? Our job is just to put the tenant and the applicant together, and the landlord has to make the ultimate decision based on what is presented to it. It's not for us to articulate what are the requirements and all that stuff, because if we put ourselves in that shoe and it fails, right, and blows up, guess who they're gonna go after? They're gonna go after the agent because you advised me about this. This is why I kind of walk on eggshells with this, because again, my defense is, that's a great question. I don't have the answer. This is a good opportunity to maybe speak with an attorney that can explain it in better details and how to navigate. And a consultation to speak with an attorney is very minimal. Some will probably not even charge you to do so. Direct them to the qualified peoples that can answer that question. Don't compromise and put yourself in the line of fire, because if this backfires on us, it's gonna come back to haunt us. Yes, sir.
Okay, I think that's covered. You explained it at the beginning, rent spree. It's a member service. Rent, property management has no insurance. So if you're a broker, worker with Keller Williams, then you can, get the insurance. There's a form you filled out and get the insurance. That's the best way.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can definitely ask that a tenant get, rentals insurance, but also as a landlord, if they're first time landlords, right? They might have lived in the property, now they're buying a second home and they're deciding to rent their property and they have no understanding as an investor or renting a property. One of the key elements that you have to understand is they have to advise and make sure that their insurance, homeowners insurance, knows that they're going to be using this as a tenant, because that premium changes. The cost changes as well. And if you don't, and something happens that the tenants did, the insurance can decline the damage, because they were not divulged, or they didn't know that you were using the property as a tenant, as a rental property instead as a owner occupied. So immediately, that's a red flag for me, is making sure that the owner is aware that, is the insurance carrier know that you're renting this as an investment property. Okay, good question, guys. Right, if the applicant will receive a government rent subsidy to assist in the payment of rent, such as, here it is, guys, Section 8 vouchers, applicant may choose to provide lawful, verifiable, alternative evidence of reasonable ability to pay, rather than have the housing provider rely on a credit report. The applicant should be given a reasonable time to provide the alternative documentation. Okay, so it's, again, full transparency, but it also provides you with an understanding why this application is the first line of defense of getting a good understanding of where you stand with the information of this particular applicant. Okay, because this will either take you to the next step or stop, and unfortunately, you didn't meet the minimum requirements. Unfortunately, thank you so much. We wish you all the very best. And you leave it at that, because they know as much as we know that they didn't meet the minimum requirement. And what are the minimum requirements, right? It's income, is job stability, it's history, it's a background check, right? And what I mean by background, it could be your credit, your criminal fraud, such as fraud checks and evictions. All of those elements are the criteria that someone may not qualify, right? And that gives the landlord the opportunity to do it right, and not continue with the process because they don't meet the minimum qualifications. The next is the applicant will receive a rent subsidy pursuant to the following government program, and elects to provide alternative documentation if necessary. The applicant further authorizes the housing provider to disclose information prior, current, sequential owners and agents whom applicant has or intends to have rental applications, right? So the beautiful thing about this section here is that the applicant further authorizes the landlord to disclose information to a prior, current owner or agent, right? So you can now ask questions regarding the specific applicant, right? on, the history, and reaching out and making sure that they are the individual, and do a very thorough background check. The applicant will sign rent your complete application, fee not already paid. Again, I apologize, this is just from a prior file, but you get the information, property information and screening fee. Property information, the applicant submits the application to lease or rent the premises located. Proposal local which may fit the applicant's rental criteria, rent amount per rent. A lot of it can be included, a lot of it shouldn't be included, it's a discretion. And the applicant will provide us screening information and feed directly to the housing provider's authorized screening service at, or B, applicant shall pay a screening fee as directed, and what the amount is and all that and so forth. Housing provider shall return the entire screening fee if the applicant is not selected for tenancy, and I think this is what Christine was talking about. Shall return the entire screening fee the applicant is not selected for the tenancy regardless of the reason within 7 days of selecting another applicant for tenancy or within 30 days of when the applicant was submitted, whichever occurs first. If a housing provider has a written screening criteria, the criteria is disclosed to the applicant with the application screening criteria, and the first application meets the criteria to approve for tenancy, then the housing provider shall refund the entire screening fee within 7 days. Now, here it is, folks, okay? When you get to this level, you do have two options, right? The option for the applicant to pay for their screening fee, which is their background check, credit check, or the housing provider, right? Now, once let's say you get 20 applications, right? You're not going to run application checklists of everyone, right? You're going to have to dissect them. One of those will probably be the most fitted applicant to rent the place. But in essence, to protect yourself as a landlord, right? It's to your best interest for you to pay for that application fee and then incorporate that amount if they are not going to, if they are going to rent the place, right? Then you can charge it as part of the first and deposit, right? That you can now include that rental fee. And I think, and I'm not sure what the cost, I think it's $35 per applicant that they're charged. I can be wrong on that. But you can actually add that, once you find a qualifying person. Now, when it comes to an applicant, right, that does not qualify the minimum, right? To me, I think it would be the best is you're not just going to run credit checks for everyone. You're only going to find the most qualified people. And let's say out of those 3 of them, you want to thoroughly check, right? They met the first threshold, right? And now it's a battle of who's going to get it, right? Because all 3 of them are well qualified, right? And you want to do a thorough background check. To me personally, I would be having a discussion with the landlord and telling the landlord, I think it would be to your best interest to pay that fee, and that way, you don't have to reimburse, but at least peace of mind, that out of the 3 applicants, this is the most qualified one, and if they're interested, then you can rent it. And then the second one, let's say that the first one found another place and decided not to rent it, then you can go with backup up for number 2. And if that one doesn't go, then number 3, as an example, right? Because the problem now with this is that they don't, if the tenant pays for this application based on section C, it says that the housing provider, which is the landlord, shall return the entire screening fee if the applicant is not selected for tenancy, regardless of the reason, within 7 days of selecting another applicant, right? So, it's one of those very kind of gray areas, because even if you don't select an applicant within 7 days, right? Then the threshold is or within 30 days of when the application was submitted, whichever occurs first. Right, some way, somehow, you still are gonna be obligated to pay back the tenant's reimbursement of that application of $35. So you want to be crystal clear that you're not just allowing everyone to submit applications, right? You want to make sure you give this information, and then out of those, then you go through the first, interview, then the second interview, and then once they pass the first and the second interview of it, then you can now utilize the lease agreement, because this is the individual that you're actually going to sign off on a month-to-month or the lease agreement. Does that make sense? And then that's kind of how this process works, right? Applications shall provide social security, tax ID, and identification number to housing provider if checked, signatures, and all that. The next one is the notice of regarding background investigation report pursuant to the, this is again, that BRRN, as we stated earlier, the information, the intent to obtain information about you for investigation. So it's basically disclosing to the tenant, hey, by the way, we're gonna do a real thorough background. And that may be a stopping point. They says, you know what, I have a bit of a discrepancy in my background history. Maybe I shouldn't apply, right? Then, they have the decision that can eliminate a lot of people from applying. Just because you send this application doesn't necessarily mean they're going to fill it out and submit it back. It's just an application. It's like an application to be employed, right? You'll get the application because you want a job, but if you don't fill it out and turn it in, after reading, there might be some things that I don't think. That might be a deterrent for a lot of people to not apply and go through the process of it, just the most qualified people. This is why I think this application screening is very, very good and vital in our business practice. I'm not going to go too much into it for the sake of time. I know I've already gone 10 minutes past my time, but it gives you kind of and I encourage all of you, please read these forms and get a good understanding. And if you have any questions, reach out to me. We can go through it together. All right, and that kind of wraps up today. Any thoughts, questions, or concern regarding this form? And remember, utilize the checklist and utilize our transaction coordinator to provide you with all of the forms that are necessary to complete the file, but more so to get paid once the applicant is in the property. With that, I appreciate you all. Thank you very much for being on the call. If you have any additional questions, feel free to reach out. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Simon. This is
Thank you,
great as
Simon.
always.
Thank
Have
you.
a great weekend, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Simon.
Thank you. All right. Yeah, great class participation today. That's awesome.
Simon, I think this is a great idea to do continuous classes